Welcome to the Conscious Radio Network's YouTube channel. Become enlightened, have fun, and tell all your friends and family to share with everyone they know. You can find us on Facebook and stay up to date on our Facebook group, or find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Our podcasts can be found on Libsyn, iHeart, Spotify, Google Podcast, and more. Most of all, remember to go to our official website at consciousradionetwork.com for podcasts, hosts, future shows, and scheduling. We also want to welcome our international audience. Don't stop now. Enjoy the community. Subscribe today.
This is the Conscious Radio Network.
Good day, afternoon, or night, wherever you may be on this spaceship we call Earth. Welcome to Conscious Radio Network special report, coming back to you from the seance. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Paul Mekas. If this is your first time watching, please click subscribe, like, share, comment, and also don't forget to follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. Returning with us today, Jim Marshall, Septemics, a philosophical science. We are coming and jumping into part 12 of Septemics, a philosophical science, hierarchies of human phenomena, analysis, prediction, and management of human affairs, with the one and only Jim Marshall, founder and creator of Septemics and the author of the book, Septemics. But before we jump in, welcome, Jim. Welcome back.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. All the way from out west there. Is
Yep.
it dry? It's probably as dry there as it's dry here in Florida. Oh, my gosh. So before we jump into part 12 of, let's give a quick introduction and recap.
Okay. Well, for those of you who may not know who I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. And today we're going to discuss some of the contents of that book.
Yes. And some of that contents will start on chapter 4, book 2 of the scale of civilization. Let's see, here we go. All right. Cool.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's talk about civilization. Now, some people confuse that with society. You can have a society that's civilized and a society that's not civilized. So this is not the scale of society. It's the scale of civilization, which is a subset of society. Because a society can be either, if you go according to the way it's normally broken down by anthropologists, it's civilized, barbaric, or primitive. So there are societies that are not civilized. So this is about civilization. And this is a scale of how civilizations develop, how they come about.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a linear scale, meaning there's no apparent congruence between levels 1 and 7, which is what you get in a spiral scale. This is a gradual scale, meaning that each level gradually morphs into the adjacent one. There's not a quantum leap, as is the case in some scales. And it's a general scale, meaning you find the level and you're done, unless you go to another civilization.
Yeah.
So this is a very general scale. This is the most general scale of all of them. That means it's not at all context driven. This is big. This is very big. Now, the dotted vertical line on the right, that is the axis, and it tells you what this scale is measuring. In other words, if you have a scale, what is it a scale of? You have to have, you have to define what the scale is measuring. I mean, if I give you a piece of wood that's a yard long with no markings on it. It's of no use to you until I put 1 inch markings on it or centimeter markings. Then it's useful to you. So what we're measuring here is at the top, spirituality and conceptualism, and at the bottom, solidity and materialism.
Huh.
So as you ascend this scale, you get more spirituality and more conceptualism. And as you descend the scale, you get the opposite, which is solidity and materialism.
Yeah.
So this gives you a way to analyze a civilization. And we'll get to that later on. So now, all civilizations begin at level 1, which is philosophy. So when we talk about the Western tradition or Western civilization, we generally begin with the Greeks.
Mm.
What are they famous for? Philosophy.
Yeah.
Socrates, Plato,
Later.
Aristotle, Pythagoras, and so forth. Philosophy. And philosophy really is about reason. That's the essence of philosophy. Now, the word literally means love of wisdom, but it really helps to define it as reason.
Mm.
So, when you're talking about irrational people or very primitive people, there's not much reason. They're not really reasoning things. Primitives say, well, the sun god is angry, and so we must sacrifice a virgin to placate him. There's no reason in that. That's just some kind of
Materialistic.
pattern, behavior pattern that they have going on.
Yeah.
So philosophy is about reason. Now, I should also point out that the way philosophy is defined today is very different from how it was defined in bygone eras. Really, the philosophers who I mentioned before, the famous Greek philosophers, and of course there are many others who I didn't mention, they were all polymathic. The philosophers today are not. So if you go into, for example, the philosophy department of a university and talk to these philosophers, you'll find that they have a very narrow field of interest.
Mm.
They are not polymathic. So really, originally, there was no real difference between a polymath and a philosopher. And that really did not go away until after the Enlightenment, and we started getting the scientific method coming in and specialization coming in because of industrialization. And then we got the kind of fragmented society we have now, very fragmented, where people are specialized in a certain field. So you talk to a guy, let's say he has a doctorate in mathematics. Well, if you try to talk to him about any one of 100 other subjects, he has no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
He knows his mathematics. And that is how the education system is set up, especially graduate school. They want you to specialize. They do not want you to be wise. They don't want you to be a lover of wisdom. They want you to do the job, get your check, and go home.
Mhm.
And shut up.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about philosophy, keep that in mind. Keep in mind whatever understanding you have of Aristotle, for example, who was for centuries, many centuries, referred to as the philosopher. He was a polymath. So that's sort of an expanded view of what philosophy is, because people who look at it the way it is today, they're going to say, yeah, it's a very narrow field, and there's only a few people who understand it. Well, that's what it has become over time. But that is not how it started out.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you have philosophy, then you get religion from that. So the philosophical truths are the basis for the religion. So a good example is Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus of Nazareth was a philosopher. He was going around teaching philosophy. If you read the Gospels, the four Gospels, it's very clear. He was, now the Jews called him rabbi, which means teacher. Okay? So teacher is very different from priest. Okay, so he was a philosopher, and then they took his philosophy and they turned it into a religion.
Hmm.
Well, what is religion about? Religion is not about reason, it's about belief. You either believe or you don't believe. And you better believe, because if you don't, you can get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So we had Christianity, which was all about kindness and forgiveness, generosity. And within 100 years, they were slaughtering one another over religious disagreements. They're really philosophical disagreements. But they didn't think of it that way because they thought of it as a religion. And then eventually it became, as everybody knows, the Crusades, let's go kill everybody, the Inquisitions, where lots of people were tortured, killed, imprisoned because of their religious beliefs. So, because they did not hold the belief that was in power. And that is exactly what's going on in the United States today. If you are foolish enough to express your beliefs, you're going to get in a lot of trouble.
Oh,
People
yeah.
are going to come after you with baseball bats
Yeah.
and
Or
guns.
guns.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not safe to say what you believe unless you're going to say what they want to hear.
Mm.
That's safe. And there's a lot of people who do that. Then once you have religion, the religion then gives you a basis for law. The religious beliefs then become law. For instance, in the Catholic Church, you have the 6 rules of the church, which you must obey. Well, Jesus didn't think those up. He was a philosopher. He was not giving us rules of the church. The church figured those out.
Mhm.
Okay, so now law is the same thing as morals. Morals and law is the same thing. Now, people get morals confused with ethics. Ethics is a sub-study of philosophy. Ethics requires reason. Morals is a different thing. So you have the 10 Commandments, and either you obey them or you don't obey them. And if you don't obey them, you're going to go to hell.
Mm.
So you better go and confess it to the priest.
Yeah.
Okay? So those are laws. Okay? Then until you have beliefs, you can't really have law. See, you have to. That's why there are no libertarian societies. Because to have a libertarian society, that libertarianism is really very counter to beliefs in general. They're not into beliefs. In other words, you want to believe that, that's fine, you can believe that. Don't tell me what to believe. You can believe that. I'm not going to bother you, you don't bother me. Okay? That's libertarianism. So there are no libertarian governments. None. And people who are trying to establish libertarian governments, lots of luck.
Mhm. Yeah. Good luck.
You're not going to get anywhere. Okay, so once you have law and morals, and realize there's no meaningful difference between those two. For example, in the Old West, uh, it was a society of ranching, meaning they had range where they could feed the horses and the cows. That's what made it profitable. So if you were to rustle cattle or horses, you got the death penalty.
Mm.
So the rancher goes out, right? And he sees there's like 500 cows missing. So what he would do is he would get all of his men, he would go to all of his neighbors, go to all of them, and they get maybe 10, 20, 30 guys. And they would all get their guns and go out, and they would follow the trail of those 500 cattle. And eventually it would lead them to the rustlers. And they would throw a rope over a tree and hang them. Okay? That was their moral code. If you steal a horse, you die.
Yeah.
Okay? Obviously, we don't have that moral code in the United States anymore. Even, do you know that the average incarceration for murder in the United States is a little over 6 years?
Wow. Yeah. That's way too little.
Right. So if you're going to send a guy to jail for only 6 years for murder, well, those people are not even going to consider what went on in the Old West. But also in the Old West, if some guy came and molested your wife, you got your shotgun, you went over and shot him.
Yeah.
Everybody said, good for you. Okay? Morals. They had a moral code, and there's really no meaningful difference between moral codes and laws.
Mm.
Okay. Then, once you have law, then you can have social sciences. You cannot have social sciences without law because you have no skeletal framework. What are you studying?
Yeah.
Social sciences are about culture. And you can't even talk about culture until you have morals and law, because that defines your culture.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that changes all the time. It's different in different places and times. And then the social sciences start to come about. They start getting things like rhetoric, which is really debate, and poetry, and history, and accounting. A lot of the oldest records we have, going back 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, are accounting records.
Mm.
So they would put down in clay, Joe Smith came in and he gave me 23 cows and 18 goats. And this gets written down. And then in exchange, I gave him 31 pieces of silver or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what was going on. Okay.
That's a long time ago too. Even
Yes.
ancient Sumerian text even
Right.
shows some of that. It's like,
Right.
whoa.
And even the Romans, a lot of what we have from the Romans is accounting. So, you find something, in the basement of the Vatican, and it says, well, we had to send to the troops 15 carts of wheat, 10 barrels of water, 2 carts of weapons. It's accounting.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, after you get social sciences and you have a culture, then you get art. That comes next. Because until you have a culture, you can't have art because you don't have a frame of reference. Art is about aesthetics. Aesthetics is another subset of philosophy. So you cannot even have an aesthetic viewpoint until you have a culture. So the culture looks at things a certain way. And then you can have art. So we're going to depict these different things.
Yeah.
If you read the Aeneid, which was written about 2,000 years ago by Virgil at the behest of Octavian, it starts out, I sing of men and arms. Okay? So this was the greatest written artistic work ever created at that time. And you can make an argument that nothing greater has ever been written than that. Uh, so it was, the culture, the Roman culture is embedded in the Aeneid, even though the Aeneid is set about, we don't really know, but about 800 years before it was written.
Mm. Wow.
Because the Aeneid is about Aeneas, who eventually founds Rome, and then Romulus and Remus are his progeny. And the whole story about how that came about, which takes 12 books.
Yeah.
So that's art. It's very artistic. But the culture, the Roman culture, is embedded in it. It could not exist until that. Even if you read the Odyssey,
Yeah.
Homer
Iliad and the
talks about
Odyssey.
how shrewd Odysseus was. He describes him as cunning Odysseus. See, that was a virtue to them. Now, in our culture, we take umbrage at that. See, we think, oh, this guy's a snake oil salesman. That's not. We don't think of that as. But to the Greeks, being shrewd, outsmarting people was a virtue.
Yeah.
That was their culture. And throughout the whole thing, you see Odysseus outsmarting everybody,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. Some of the greatest literary pieces, man, it aren't even taught in school anymore. I was lucky
Right.
to get some of them. Epic of Gilgamesh, Iliad and the Odyssey,
Yes,
Tale of Two Cities.
right,
Unbelievable.
right. So after art, which is level 5, we get crafts. Crafts come after arts. Crafts means technology. The shoemaker, the pot maker, the potter, the farrier, the baker. You have all of these professions.
Mm.
Now, they already had an aesthetic before that. You see, the aesthetic tells you what's beautiful and what's not. And so you can't have pottery until you have an idea about what's good, what's going to be good about the pottery. You follow me? Like if you
Mm.
look at the ancient Greek pottery or the ancient Chinese pottery, that the it's an artistic underpinning
Yeah.
to it. So technology really comes after arts. It develops after arts. And then after you have your arts and your crafts and your technology, the guy who knows how to make a spear, the guy who knows how to make a bow and arrow, right? That's technology. Then you have business. Why? Because you have all these things to sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have all
Trade.
these professions who are creating all these things. This guy produces loaves of bread. This guy produces jewelry. This guy produces uh, helmets,
Mm.
and you get specialization. And so these people are in business.
Yeah.
Or you get commerce. So that is the last thing to develop in this sequence is commerce. Now think about commerce. Commerce is as materialistic as you can get.
Yeah.
What's more materialistic than commerce? Right? The guy doesn't care if you like him. The guy doesn't care if you're holy or if you're virtuous. He wants to get that money for that shoe that he made or that sandal that he made. He wants to get his price for it. Right?
Yeah.
That's commerce. And he's going to do all kinds of things like advertising, give you a sales pitch, right? He has accounting to keep track of his business. That's very solid. So if you talk to people who are in business, these are not spiritually and conceptually advanced people. They're solid and materialistic.
Mm.
They want that money. So this gives you a way to judge the society.
Wow.
How advanced is this society? The higher on the scale it is, the more advanced it is, because the closer it is to spirituality and conceptualism. So the guy at the bottom, he's in commerce. He doesn't see beauty in mathematics. He doesn't see beauty in physics. He doesn't give a damn about Rubens or Shakespeare. He just wants that money, right? That is a very solid and materialistic way of living.
Yeah.
So you can look at the society and say, what does this society feature? Well, I started out by talking about the ancient Greeks. What do we know them for? Philosophy. You see a lot of philosophy going on now in the United States and in the industrialized world. It's
Yeah.
been reduced to this tiny little Jesuitical argument. It's not what it once was.
No.
And there's only a few people who understand it, which you have to understand. Aristotle was the tutor for Alexander the Great.
Mm.
So whatever Alexander learned was from Aristotle, right? That's inherently polymathic. And that continued for hundreds and hundreds of years, where the rich people would bring somebody, a learned person, into their castle and say, teach my children.
Yeah.
So it's completely fragmented.
Yeah. Send them to
So
universities.
you have separate, the math teacher doesn't know anything about chemistry, the chemistry teacher doesn't know anything about history, the history teacher doesn't know anything about whatever it is.
And that is few and far between, because I had a couple teachers. There was a gym teacher that taught math and taught art. And there was a science teacher that taught math and taught PE. And it was like, I don't even see that anymore.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. The old tradition of the scholarly athlete is gone. It's completely gone. For example, the most famous football coach of all time, Vince Lombardi, right? The Super Bowl trophy is named after him, the Vince Lombardi Trophy. Okay, he won the first Super Bowl. Now he went to Fordham University, which back then was even more elite than it is today, because all the universities have degraded. And before he was hired by the Green Bay Packers, he taught in a prep school. He taught Latin in a prep school. Okay? So we're not talking about some dumb jock,
Yeah.
which is mostly what you have now. So now there's so much money, level 7 commerce, embedded in college sports that the tail is wagging the door. The
Yeah.
dog. They don't care if you can read or write. If you can throw that ball in a straight line for 40 yards, we want you. We don't care if you flunked every course.
Yeah.
And they make up these stupid courses that these guys. Well, that was not true 100 years ago. I mean, when Notre Dame became a powerhouse of football, those guys on that team were scholars. In those days, if you failed, you were off the team.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now they've been dumbing it down. We'll give them basket weaving, and they make up these courses for a mental midget that they give to these athletes. if they care at all.
Hmm.
Because I suspect that there's even some payola going involved where look, this guy is a candidate for a Heisman Trophy, and you're going to pass him on this trigonometry course, and here's $500.
Yeah, because I'm sure the universities are probably getting some kickbacks. If you can't produce a top one athlete, you're going to lose some of your funding.
Right. I mean, they make so much money from their sports, especially
Yeah.
football. That's the biggest one. They make so much money from that that's what they care about.
Yeah.
So the scholar athlete is pretty much obsolete now.
Yeah. Very few and far between.
Right. So once in a while, you find an athlete who is scholarly, and it's like, whoa, like Tony La Russa.
Mm.
Tony La Russa graduated law school. He's a lawyer, one of the greatest baseball managers of all time, right? Very smart man. He invented a whole bunch of things that he brought into baseball that nobody had ever done before because he was so smart, right? The man's a
Yeah.
lawyer. Very unusual. Most of these guys, like Sparky Anderson, Sparky Anderson, I don't know of his history, but if you listen to him speak, he sounds like he never graduated junior high.
Hmm.
But, Hall of Fame baseball manager. I'm not knocking him. He's one of the best.
Yeah.
Great at what he did. But there's no scholarliness in that person.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's part of the whole decline when you go down from level 1 to level 7.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's when you're looking at a degraded civilization, which is what we have in industrialized society. You're looking at a civilization that's solid and materialistic.
Mm.
It's not spiritual or conceptual.
Yeah. Mm.
So that's the scale.
Cool. Yeah, and I noticed it goes down rather than up. That as far as
Right.
that direction.
That's right.
So,
It descends from 1 downward.
yeah. Yeah.
Now, of course, you can have all kinds of societies that are not civilized societies.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
I would argue there is no Earth civilization
True. True.
because this is not a civilized, human race is not civilized. Now, there are pockets of civilization. There are, groups, religious groups. You can go into a Buddhist monastery
Mm.
or a Hindu monastery and find very brilliant, smart men and
Yeah.
women in there. Those people are civilized. For example, the Society of Jesus.
Mm.
Society of Jesus has been around 400 years. Those are civilized people. Believe me, I spent 4 years with them. They're civilized.
Wow.
Okay? Now, of course, there are individuals who are civilized, and there are some groups that are civilized. But as a race, this is
Yeah.
not a civilized planet.
Got that right. That's why the aliens won't want to talk to us.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
just like, when they drive by, they lock the doors on their car when they drive by this neighborhood.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When they pass by in their ship, they're like, "Roll up the windows."
That's right.
Mm.
So are we going on to another scale here?
Yeah. Let's go on to
Okay.
chapter 5, scale of survival.
Okay. Nothing I can possibly say can convey how important the scale is.
Oh yeah.
This scale alone could dramatically change Earth society and dramatically change anybody who learns how to use it.
Mm.
because survival is what we're all trying to do. Now, if you look at survival in a broad sense, okay, so when Tom Brady goes out there, right, and he takes that hike and he's going to throw a pass, he's trying to survive. Now, yes, he's got $20 million in the bank. He's not starving to death, but still he's trying to survive. It's just a very high level. As opposed to some homeless guy, he's just trying to panhandle some change so he can get something to eat. He's trying to survive too. Every organism is trying to survive. So that is what this is about. Now, this is a spiral scale, meaning there is an apparent congruence between level 1 and level 7. Level 1 is no need to survive. Level 7 is not surviving. These two things, to the unschooled viewer, look very much the same. See, a person who's at level 1, he's retired.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got his $10 million and he's sitting there playing golf, going out for dinner, riding in his yacht. Okay? He's retired. He doesn't have a need to survive. There's no pressure on him. See? So, like Johnny Unitas, who was perhaps the greatest quarterback of his day, and he's now deceased, when he was playing for the Colts, you know, he had to complete that pass. It was survival to him.
Yeah.
You know, we have to win in order for me to get paid, in order for me to get a new contract, you know? So then he retired and he lived off all the money he earned. He didn't have a need to survive. So that is the top of the scale. No need to survive. That person is not even attempting to survive. Now, at 7, not surviving means not established. Now, what level 1 and level 7 have in common is, in both cases, you're not in the game. A person who is not surviving is not in the game. So, for example, you have a guy who he's studied music, he practices, he plays in his basement. You know, he thinks, well, maybe someday I'll become a professional musician. But he's not surviving. He's not in the game. He's not trying to get gigs. He's not trying to get a recording contract. He's not surviving.
Yeah.
In other words, his career as a musician has not been established. It doesn't exist. And at the other end, you have the guy who's retired. He's also not surviving, but he's not surviving because he doesn't need to survive. See? There's no pressure on him. He can do whatever he wants. So, you know, I have a little joke that I use. You know, sometimes you have like a famous actor or musician, and suddenly they're not around. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, like somebody like Neil Sedaka. Neil Sedaka had 10 hits in 6 years.
Oof.
Right?
Wow.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's like nobody at that time was more successful than he. Okay, this is before the Beatles.
Yeah.
So then you look around, well, where's Neil Sedaka? And my answer is he's spending his money.
Yeah. Enjoying his life.
Yeah. So, you know, you have some, like a perfect example of this is Kim Novak, superstar actress of the 50s and 60s. Okay? Just disappeared. Just left. Where is she? She's spending her money. She's got a ranch out in the country, animals, a husband, a family. She said, goodbye. I'm not doing this anymore. She's spending her money. No need to survive.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you see people who go on and on and on and on. Like Warren Spahn. Warren Spahn, in his heyday, was the best left-handed pitcher in the world.
Mm.
Okay, and I think he played for 23 years.
Whoa.
Well, near the end, he was he was in his 40s, but he needed the money. So sometimes I'll see a movie and it's a terrible movie with a star, and I'll say, well, that guy must have needed some money to do this.
Yeah.
So like, you see a movie, Orson Welles, I'm going to watch it, right? And it's a
Yeah.
dog movie. Well, Orson must have needed a couple of $1,000,000 because that's why he
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
look at Tim Tebow. I mean, look how many times he tried to retire, twice?
uh-huh,
Kept coming back. Oh, I'm not done yet. Oh, I'm not done yet. All right.
right. Right. Okay, so you don't want to confuse 1 and 7 because, as I've often explained, the most catastrophic mistake you can make with septemics is with the spiral scale where you confuse 1 with 7.
Mm.
Okay? So you just look at the person. What is this person doing? Is this person not surviving in this context? Remember, it's a specific scale, there's a context to it. Okay, so it's a quantum scale, meaning you're at level 2, and then a billionth of a second later, you're at level 1 or 3. There's no gradation in this. And I use this to my advantage 7 days a week. I'll be, because I have a lot of different things going on, and I can spot where that activity is on this scale. And when it goes from, let's say, 4 to 3, I feel it. Click.
Mm.
We're at 3. Different formula.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of these levels. That's why I say one cannot overstate the necessity of this. So, for example, the American education system has been losing ground continuously for the past 60 years. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. Okay?
Mhm.
And so that's why you have so many people with homeschooling now. Now, the universities that are run by smart people have figured out, just empirically, that the homeschooled students are not a detriment. They're smarter than the other students. These kids actually want to learn. These
Yeah.
are kids, the parents want to teach them, the kids want to learn, and they're at home and they're studying. And so now, many of these elite universities, homeschool, come on in. You got your SATs? Great, you're in. And because they have figured out that the system is so dysfunctional. So what happened was the American system, education system, for a long time was at level 4, was breaking even, and then it started losing ground. Okay? Now it's down at 6, it's collapsing. Collapsing. Right? Look at what's going on now in all these universities. That's another indication of collapse. So I noticed this circa 1990. I've throughout my life have had to hire many people to work for me in my various activities. And circa 1990, I noticed a big shift. I would get guys come in, and I had an application for that. First of all, they couldn't write in the script.
Oh.
Secondly, they wrote like they were in the 3rd grade
Okay.
in block letters.
Bad
Uh,
penmanship.
and I could see that they were not, even though they had a high school diploma, they were nowhere near as qualified as the people I hired 10 years earlier or 20 years earlier. So the de facto subjects that are taught in American public schools today are drug addiction, promiscuity, violence, foul language, etc. Now, of course, there are private schools, and there are a few public schools that are functioning okay. But in general, the system it's at 6, it's collapsing.
Yeah.
And which means that unless somebody comes along with this scale who understands this, it's gonna go to 7. It's gonna be non-surviving. It will not be surviving soon. And your grandchildren will say, "You mean there used to be public schools?" Yeah. And kids would go and they would sit in a class behind desks and there was a teacher with a chalkboard. Really? What happened to that? That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because you're at 6, you're going down to 7. So, or you could look at the United States. The United States was the lone superpower in 1945. The United States could have taken over the whole world
Oh, yeah.
if they
Yeah.
wanted to, because they had the atom bomb.
Hmm.
They could have dropped it on Moscow or any place else, okay, taken over. Now the United States is collapsing. It's gone all the way down. It was at level 2, survival secured. Now it's at level 6, collapsing. Everything is collapsing. The universities are collapsing. The governments are collapsing. The money is collapsing.
Yeah.
The employment is collapsing. It's a collapsing country, okay? And the people who want it to collapse lie about it. They say everything's fine.
Yeah.
They're
Nothing's
getting,
happening.
they're getting what they want. And the people who are smart enough to see that it's collapsing are saying, it's collapsing.
Yeah.
And so don't be surprised if you come back in 25 years and there is no United States. Whether it gets cut up into part of it goes to China, part of it goes to the Russians, part of it goes to Canada. Who knows how it's going to be chopped up?
Yeah.
But if you study Spengler, Oswald Spengler, he has this whole theory about empires. The empires go through a life cycle, and that every empire has a spring, a summer, a fall, and a winter. Okay, and I would urge you to read his book. Right now, the United States is in the winter. Is in winter. It's in the same state that the Roman Empire was in the 4th century. So it's still there, but it's collapsing.
What's the name of the book?
Oh, I don't remember the name of the book off the top of my head, but if you just Google Oswald Spengler, they'll say the name of the book in the first paragraph.
Oh, okay.
It's a very, very famous book. I'm sorry I don't have it memorized, but he goes through the 4 main empires
Yeah.
of Earth and shows how
Wow.
each one of them went through this cycle.
Huh. Well, like they say, empires do fall. Every
Yes.
empire eventually falls. Nothing lasts forever.
Right.
It's a
You know
cycle.
why? Because I don't know the scale.
Yeah. Get the book, man. Get the book.
If the people in charge knew this scale, wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
So this is a specific scale. It has to have a context. So you could be surviving well in your family and well in your job, but not surviving well with your health.
Yeah.
So as with all specific scales, it has to have a context. What are we talking about here? So, for example, I talked about Kim Novak. She just Hollywood superstar, could command millions of dollars for every role she played, just walked away from it.
Wow.
Just didn't want to do it anymore. And she never took an acting lesson in her life. She was just discovered because of her astonishing beauty, which is obvious. And they put her in Picnic, the movie Picnic, starring William Holden, and the rest is history. She played this young, beautiful girl, which is what she was, a young, beautiful girl.
Yeah.
And then she had this fantastic career and walked away from it. So you could say that, that's why I say, she's a level 1, no need to survive. She doesn't give a damn about movies. She's not making any movies. You could offer her any much money, $10 million. Sorry, not interested. Okay? So she's not surviving. And that's because she got to level 2, survival secured. I mean, there's a point where you have so much money that you say, I can't possibly spend all this money. And you walk away from it. That's why I say sometimes you see somebody showing up in some odd context and you say, well, he needs money. Perfect example is Peter Frampton. Peter Frampton had the best-selling album in history with Frampton Comes Alive circa 1977.
Yeah.
Okay? And he lost everything. He wound up bankrupt, had nothing, had no money, had to go out as a guitarist and look for gigs.
Jeez.
Right? So he wound up being the guitarist for David Bowie. David Bowie's a smart man. He said, yeah, come on, you be my guitarist. So that's a guy, he went up the scale. You know, you always start at level 7 with this scale. And you work your way up. And then he lost it all. Okay? Now, a similar story is Billy Joel. Billy Joel had his brother-in-law managing his money. Billy Joel's brother-in-law stole $1 million from him. Now, you have to realize that when Billy Joel was big in the 80s, that was a lot of money.
Hell yeah.
Now, you can't even get much of a house for that.
Yeah.
So, but back then, that was a lot of money. So, but Joel just went on. He kept going. He was smart. He was dynamic. He was talented. He kept writing songs and making albums, and you know, he survived. As opposed to Frampton, who lost everything and wound up just being a sideman because he could play the guitar really well.
Yeah.
After being the most visible musical star circa 1977. So there are thousands and thousands of examples of this. But when you see the rise and fall of companies, individuals, countries, empires, they're all going up and down this scale. That is what's going on. So let's start at the bottom. So you start at not surviving, right? You're not established in something, okay? You're a person, but you're not established in that field. So then you go up and you start doing something in it, but you're immediately in peril of collapsing because you don't have anything. You don't have a platform. You don't have any money. You don't have any fame. You don't have anything. So you are in peril right away. But if you keep going, eventually you'll get up to 5 where you're not collapsing, but you're losing ground. In other words, you're losing money. So all of these big stars at some point went through this. They got to a point where they weren't in peril anymore, but they were still losing money.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, if you keep going, you get up to where you're breaking even, stability. You're not making a profit, you're just breaking even. And if you persist, then you get up to gaining ground, which is what we call success. Meaning you're making a profit.
Yeah.
Money's going in the bank every week. And if you keep going up, you get to survival secured, meaning you have security because your success is so great that you are now secure. Now, what do you do then? Some people try to stay at that level and they have big problems. You need to go up to level 1 to the top and retire. A
Yeah.
perfect example of this is Tony Bennett, the great singer. Frank Sinatra uh, was in that same genre of singing, and he said Tony Bennett is the greatest singer in the world. Okay, that's pretty good coming from Frank Sinatra, who was
Right.
in that same field, right?
Hmm.
And I agree, Bennett's a better singer than Sinatra. Well, after a while, Tony Bennett took up painting, and he worked his way up, and he was making money as a painter, as an artist. He's not bad. Now, his painting is not as good as his singing, but still, he went into another thing as opposed to Elvis. Elvis just sort of got stuck in level two, and he never just let it go and went on and said, like Kim Novak did. Kim Novak is a happy elderly woman, She has pets and land and a house and a husband. And that's what she wants.
Yeah.
There's no money troubles. So that's how this works. Now, in the chapter, I give several examples, hypothetical examples of how a person works his way up. And you can work your way up, you can work your way back down again, too.
Hmm.
So after you get the survival secured, it's not easy to stay at that level. You're better off just going up and retiring from it and do something else like Tony Bennett did.
Yeah. Pick up something else. Hmm.
Right. You know, there's this thing that you can see in famous people where the person becomes a caricature of himself. So that is a person who's sort of stuck at level two. And you could go through political careers, artistic careers, financial careers, uh, academic careers, and you can just see this at play. People go up
Yeah.
these levels and down these levels. And I'm very impressed by Oswald Spengler figuring out what he did without having the skill.
Mm.
But he just saw it as like the year
Yeah.
spring, summer, fall, winter.
Mm.
But all of those empires got up this scale and then went down.
Yeah.
There are very specific reasons why, and if you study history, you can see them.
Yeah. Yeah. And how
Any question?
history has a tendency to repeating itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just the scale at play.
Hmm.
So I pay close attention to this because I've always had a lot of different things going on. And where am I on this scale?
Yeah.
Because where you are on the scale really tells you what you should be working on. See,
Hmm.
because remember, the general rule of Septemics is you can only move to an adjacent level. If you're at level 4, breaking even, you can either go to level 3, gaining ground, or you can go to level 5, losing ground. Those are the only two possibilities.
Yeah.
Now, we know from science that a state of equilibrium is inherently unstable. It's very difficult to find a state of equilibrium in nature.
Hmm.
Everything is changing all the time.
Yeah.
And people often make this mistake where they get to a certain level and they think it's going to stay there, and it doesn't. You have to
Yeah.
keep managing it.
Yeah.
Now, the ideal is that you go all the way up to get to level 1, you retire from that, and sometimes you can have somebody else take care of it. For example, you start a company, you build it up, it becomes $1 billion company, you retire, and now you have other people running the company. So they are going up the scale.
Yeah.
So when you hire some kid off the street to work in the mailroom, he's going from 7 to 6. Now, the way it's written here, it can be a little confusing. And I thought about this a lot for a long time, how to say this, because um, it's not obvious why you go into 6 from 7. But let me explain this. Any equestrian, or anybody who really knows horses will tell you the most dangerous point is mounting the horse.
Mm.
If you watch horses, as soon as you start to mount it, he moves.
Yeah.
He says, "Oh, he's back, time to go."
Yeah.
Right? The horse knows his job. He's not stupid. So you get your foot, and as soon as he feels that weight in that stirrup, he's starting to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You got to get on that horse fast.
Very fast.
Right? So you got to think of it ahead of time. Okay, I'm going to get my left foot up there. I'm going to hold on to the pommel, and I'm going to get right up there. You're up. Okay. You just got through 6, and you're up to 5.
Mm.
See? You're not in peril anymore because you're on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're not breaking even yet, but you're losing ground. You're not getting anywhere because you're just on a horse, right?
Yeah.
You haven't accomplished. So now you start going, okay, let's go to visit the Joneses, right? So you're on the road. Okay, now you see you're breaking it. Now you're gaining ground. Oh, you're getting closer to the Joneses, you see? So you can take anything, starting a car, okay? If you're smart, now this is not as much of a problem now as it used to be because the cars are much better. But getting in a car, there's peril, right? You're not being a driver. Hey, go to your car, you unlock it, get in, you put on the seatbelt, you start it, see if it starts, okay? You don't know if it's going to start. It might not start. Sometimes you go out there, it's dead. What
Yeah.
happened? You got a dead battery or whatever. And the dead battery may be caused by the alternator being dead. So, but you don't know. See? So now, okay, you're in the car, you got it going. Okay, now we start taking it out on the road. That's level 5. Now you're going down the road. You're just, listening to your GPS. Okay, turn left. Good. Now you're gaining ground. You see, you got up to 3. You're on your way. See, then you get to your destination. That's survival secure. You got there.
Yeah.
So what do? You get out of the car. No need to survive. That's level 1. You
Yeah.
see? So I just took the most quotidian possible thing and ran it up this scale. This is uh, absolutely inherent in everything we do all the time. It's there. And if you
Mm.
read the chapter, you get a chance to see how I explain it with examples uh, of how this works. And then you're not going to make the mistakes. What is it? What's the statistic? 95% of all new businesses fail.
Mm.
Well, hello. They don't know this scale.
Yeah.
So,
Which then brings us to the next scale, which we will touch on next week, called scale of management.
yes, the scale of management facilitates your survival.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only business management, it's any kind of management. Managing
Mm-hmm.
your marriage, managing your family, managing your church, managing your political campaign. I mean, and again, if you don't know that data, you're just whistling past the graveyard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Not
see this
every.
all the time. Like I had a relative of mine. He was in a business. He bought a store. He's making money. So then he said, "Oh, I'm going to buy another store." Totally went broke. The other store didn't work. He
Yeah.
lost everything.
Whew.
He did not follow this scale.
Yeah.
So you have to study this to really see how to use it. And once you become sensitive to it, you get a grip on how to benefit from it. Okay, I see. Well, we're breaking even now. Okay, we're at level 4. Good. Okay. And then you have to just keep breaking even and try to get up to 3, which is gaining ground. You see?
Hmm.
So this is, again, there's that datum about 90% of getting the right answer is asking the right question.
Yeah.
And in Septemics, this is resolved because once you know the level you're at, the next level up is the right question. So you learn how to, in any one of the 35 scales in any application, you learn, okay, I'm at this level. Now I'm going to target for this next level up because that is the next naturally occurring thing.
Yeah.
And so most people don't do that, which is why you have all these businesses failing, which is why 50% of all marriages in the United States end in divorce,
Mm.
and which is why empires collapse. So if the Romans had this, we'd be speaking Latin today.
Yeah. Oh, Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure.
You're very welcome.
I'll see you next
Everybody,
week.
go get your book, Septemics. That way, when we come back next time, you got the book and you can sit there, watch it, and go through the chapters with us, or at least the next chapter, which is chapter 6 in book 2, which
Right.
is part of this book, on the scale of management. Or you can start all the way from chapter 1, book 1, which is also in this book. But all in all, Jim, I appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thanks, Paul. I'll see you next week.
You are very welcome. Thank you, everybody,
Bye-bye.
for chiming in. We will see you next time.